Okay, I'm about to embark on fitting the YSS PD valves into my trusty old BMW F650GS. That's the 800 twin, and this has got the old damper rod technology conventional forks on it. So the first thing I've done is taken it for a bit of a ride over some roads that I know, some good corrugations on the dirt roads, get a bit of a feel for how it performs so I can compare that when I've got the valves in place. Now, removing the front forks should be fairly simple operation. Prop the bike up, it's on the centre stand at the moment. Jack the front up a little bit just to get the front wheel off the ground, drop the front wheel out, take the brake caliper off, may do that first actually. Take off the guard and the fork brace, and then there's just a couple of pinch bolts under there and one at the top, and drop the forks out. Okay, slight technical hitch. This is the top of the fork leg, and it's not a screw-in cap, it's one held in by that little ring there. So somehow I've got to push this down and with my other hand get that little bugger out. Good luck to me. Okay, found a solution. Organised a bit of steel bar with a handle on it that I can lean into. It's then possible to push the top of the cap in, and then pick this circlip out, which is actually in quite lightly. And then it's job done. So now I can go about pulling the fork apart. Okay, once that clip's removed, we can get the cap out. Spacer tube, which we'll need to cut down a little bit later to account for the size of the valve that's going in. And let's bring that up, drop the fork down, and we've got a spring in here as well. Try not to make a huge mess with the oil. Get that straight in the bucket. Now the damper rod needs to come out of there, but one thing we can't really tell from the video, I will be measuring the fork oil just as a reference for how far down it is from the top of the tubes, and then I can compare that to what the recommendation from YSS is on how much fork oil should go back in after the procedure. Now I can see the fork oil quite easily. It's quite a large diameter fork, so we don't need to be too technical with it. That's the top of the fork oil there, and that's 150. Now I'm also going to measure the quantity of fork oil that comes out. This is a bit of a reference. Now it does have a drain hole in the bottom of the fork, which you can see there while I'm draining it. That will have to come out to let the damper rod out anyway, but I'm just going to get the fork oil out the top end for now. Okay, to release the damper rod we need to take this screw out of the bottom here. This could possibly have been done easier on the bike and then drain the oil out before taking the forks out. Can be quite tight, so I use a spanner on the Allen key if necessary, and we just take that out. That will free up the damper rod. case any oil drips out, but it has been draining overnight, so that's all good. We should now be able to drop the damper rod out. And there it is. Now, part of putting these valves in is it's necessary to put in some extra holes to basically take the damper rod out of the equation, so the damper rod no longer has any effect. So here's one I did earlier. It's a matter of drilling according to the instructions with the YSS valves. In this case, it's 2 extra 8mm holes right the way through. So you end up with a total of 6 holes in the damper rod. So the damper rod now has no effect because the damping will be taken care of by the YSS valve. I've carefully centre punched a couple of guides using the instructions, approximately 10mm either side of the existing holes, and using my rickety old Black & Decker. This would be better done in a drill press, but I don't have one of those. So I'll drill a couple of guide holes to get up to the ultimate size. And very carefully with this next part. It's quite easy to break a thin drill like this. And the other one. I'll step up a couple of times. Of course, with these cordless drills it can be difficult to get the drill bit gripped tightly enough. And finally up to 8mm. Done. Now it's very important to give this a good filing, get rid of all the burrs inside and out. So for that task I'm going to hit it with a rat tail file to get on the inside there, and a flat file around the edge as well, and I won't bore you with those details. Okay, all done, all cleaned out. There's no more burrs in there, and I've even got the high pressure hose onto it and washed all the muck out from inside, so it's completely clean. A little bit of water in there, but 40-degree day in Perth today, so that's going to dry out pretty quick. Okay, so how do these things work? Currently you've got the top of your damper rod, holes in the bottom do the damping by letting the oil through slowly, and a spacer sitting on top. The YSS valves sit on top of the damper rod. If necessary, they'll come with these model specific collars. So that sits on top of the damper rod, and then your spacer sits on top of that. So one further thing we have to do is shorten this spacer, because that'll be getting far too much preload now when we put it all back together. So we need to shorten it by the same amount as the valve. I'm actually going to shorten it by maybe a couple of mil less, because the front end is a little bit soft, so I'm going to probably about 2 mil less than it needs to be to just put a little extra preload on the front end. I'm not a heavy person, so standard's pretty close. So we need to cut these plastic tubes by the feel of things in the F650. So I need to cut those off. Not quite sure the best way to do that. Probably a cut-off saw would be excellent because you'll get it perpendicular. I don't have a cut-off saw, so I'm going to have to cut it as perpendicular as I can, and then just touch it up on a sanding wheel that I have. Just a little touch in case I've got any slight unevenness in it, and see how I go. Okay, what I've come up with is carefully lining it up in the vise, and I'm going to use the edge of the vise as a guide for a dovetail saw, which I've just done the first one, and that's worked really quite well. I've judged the distance based on a little lip on the collar. That's just doing it a little bit shorter to get that little bit extra preload. Probably won't make much difference, but it's carefully lined up. I've also checked against the previous one, and being a little bit conservative, so if it's a little bit out, I can just take that off on the my accurately aligned sanding wheel. So keeping up against the vise. That will hopefully guide it down pretty much perpendicular, and we'll finish it up on the wheel and check it with a 90-degree. Done. No going back now. And I can actually see that's pretty bloody good. So I'm just going to whip it onto the accurately lined up sanding wheel just to make sure it's even. Okay, this is the sanding wheel. I've got a guide here that sets 90 degrees, and I have checked that. I don't trust the graduation on it. It is about half a degree out. And it's simply a matter of just gently touching that and turning it around, holding it all in place, and that will square up. It is already pretty square. It'll just take out any unevenness out of that. Okay, we'll see how that goes. Lengthwise, we are an exact match. Now I'm just going to check around the top by turning that around. should go a little bit more. It's a little bit high on that part there. Very slight. Okay, that top is now absolutely, well, it's perfect as I can get it. I would say absolutely perfect. And the size of them is exactly the same. Job done. Okay, damper rods have been put back in, and the bolt on the bottom tightened up, and that's all good. Now we just need to drop the valves in. They sit on top, and now we're ready to put the fork oil in. Now I've got the same quantity I took out. It's a good starting point. Just using a Penrite 15 weight. 15 weight was recommended for this model by YSS, so we'll go with the recommendations. Now that's coming right to the top, because I need to work the forks around a bit. This is on the online instructions at YSS. I need to do this about 20 times apparently. Need a lot of air coming out. I'll get the rest of the oil in now. I have already done the other fork, so I know that this is not too much oil. I've got actually a little bit extra to put in, because it's easier to add than take back out, unless you've got one of those special little tools for sucking the oil out to the right level. And we'll keep working the fork. I think that should do the job. Okay, now we can check the oil level. I can see in the fork quite easily, so it's quite easy just to use a ruler. And down until it just touches the top of the oil, add a little bit, about there. And that's going to need a little bit more. Extra in. Out there. Yeah, good work. I've actually gone too much. That's alright. I'll suck a bit out. And it looks like 1 litre is going to be absolutely perfect for this model. So I shall get a little out of there and pop it in the other fork leg, which is just a tiny bit short at the moment. Okay, I took a really simple approach, just poured a little bit back out into the jug, and I've now adjusted both of them using the ruler. They're spot on, and it was just a perfect amount of oil in one bottle, which was good. So now putting it back together again, I've extended the fork up, dropped the fork spring in, the spacer, which is nice and clean, and then we need to get the fork caps back in. So it's a little bit grimy, just get that a little bit clean. Okay, and that goes in. Okay, and I've managed to lose the bar I made for taking them apart, but I've got another solution here, and it really is quite easy to get them back in. So I'll just lean on that a little bit. Okay, that's down, and I can now just work this into place, and that just clips in very easily. Done. Got the dust caps to go back on, which I'll give a clean before I put those back on, and get it all back in the bike and take it for a bit of a ride and see how it compares with beforehand. Okay, just taking it for a bit of a test ride. It's actually the second test ride. First one, it felt the damping wasn't quite enough on the stock setting of 2 turns in, so I just pulled them out and went to 3.5, and that's feeling pretty good. So I've taken a quick blast up a dirt track there. Also this bit of road here's got some nice potholes that we can see here, and I'm just hitting those potholes, and it's just like they're not there. It's so much better than the stock damping rods. It's certainly been well worth the effort. Okay, just summing things up. Adjusting them. It's quite easy to take them out with the forks still in the bike. You can take the handlebars off, pop the caps out, pull the spacers and fork springs out, and then you can use a long magnet just to take the valves out and tweak the adjustment on them if necessary. To do this, I put together my long magnet wasn't long enough, so I just got an aluminium rod, stuck a magnet on the end, and those cable ties there just keep it centered, which is necessary, otherwise the magnet just sticks it to the side of the inside of the fork tube. Anyway, that was quite easily done. I'm going to take the time to set the sag properly, which should be about 30% of the travel with my weight and all my gear, so I'll take the time to do that. And I'm also going to tweak the oil levels slightly. It's always bottomed out a little harshly, so I'm going to add a little bit of oil into them, and that's actually very easily done. You can just pop the caps out, don't need to take the handlebars out, and given that I've already accurately measured it, you can calculate the volume required to raise the fork oil level by, say, 10 millimetres. In this case, it's exactly 10 millilitres to raise it 10 millimetres in the fork. Results. I've ridden this bike for many years now over some quite rough terrain, so I'm very familiar with how the forks behave. The difference is amazing. It's any of the square-edged sharp ruts, it just soaks them up. You really don't feel them. There's no harshness there like with the old damper rods. So I'm very impressed with that. It's been well worth doing. It hasn't been particularly difficult. I've done this with no special tools. It's not particularly onerous once you know what to do. In hindsight, I think it would have been worth paying a few extra $100 to buy the kit. YSS offer a kit with replacement springs, ready-made spacers, and some nifty little adjustable fork caps, which would be good if you're loading the bike up. You could put a little extra preload on. Unfortunately, they don't sell those outside that kit, but that's probably just good marketing on their part. The downside, there is one big downside, and that's it's highlighted how poor the stock rear suspension is on this bike. So now I'm thinking, what can I do with the rear? And it looks like I might try and save up for a decent rear shock. Hope this has been helpful for you.